Today, we're going to treat animals more humanely. Tomorrow, we'll get to the hamburger.
Well, we got to educate people that this hamburger is not helping them. It is not what they were taught to believe in terms of nutrition.
Robert, you want anything to that?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind here, we have companion animals, we have farm animals, we have wildlife animals. And if you look at the state of Maine, we have some of the most progressive, in fact, we rank in the top 2 in the past year in terms of animal welfare laws. And part of the problem is having the finances to fund that. But when you look into animal welfare and so forth and wildlife, it's a total different mindset. And I brought up in a committee hearing one time when they did a bill on coyote snaring, which is a very egregious way of an animal to die. It gets caught and it takes 48 hours for it to die. The head swells up and it's pretty egregious. The point I made at the committee was that a coyote is 98.6 the same DNA as your pet dog. And yet, if that was done to your dog, it would be a felony offense and you'd be in jail. So you need to equate it all animals, including black bears and coyotes and so forth, should have the same protections in many ways that we give companion animals.
Harry, treat a coyote the same as my golden retriever?
No, what Bob said doesn't make any sense at all.
How do you really feel about it?
Listen, it's just simple. The animals that we want to protect tend to be animals with soft brown eyes and warm blood, okay? Say your house is infected with cockroaches. I bet you want to kill them. I bet you want to kill all of them. I bet you want to kill all of them on the face of the earth. Or let's take the deer tick that carries the Lyme disease. If you know somebody who has a bad case of Lyme disease, it's going to be very hard to work up some warm fuzzies to give rights or even protections to ticks. So they're only talking about a small portion of animals. And it's the soft fuzzies that are close to us. Well, maybe that makes a lot of sense because they are in a separate category. We are their caretakers. They are our almost members of our families, if not actually members of our families. But that doesn't mean they should have rights, and it doesn't mean that they are talking about applying these rights to all animals. Virtually impossible. Even to give protections to all animals doesn't even make sense.
I think we'd probably all have to agree with that. Where do we draw the line between the deer tick and the Labrador retriever?
Well, I think we've drawn the line just exactly right where it should be drawn now. I think you tinker with it on the edges, but I think that Harry's point is well taken, that you can't, it's one of those things that once you cross the line and assign any animal a series of rights, then you start to get into the discussion of, okay, well, does the dog have rights but the coyote doesn't? Or does the cockroach have rights but the brown-tailed moth does not have rights? And as someone who suffers from brown-tailed moth little welts all over my arm during this time of the year, I can tell you, I just as soon they go as well. So I think that once you assign that right to any animal, you really run into an issue of how you even begin legislation to make sense of it.
Who wants the last word before the break? Robert.
Well, again, I think we're getting caught up in rights. We're talking about animal protection and forming laws to give some of these animals some of the basic rights that, I mean protections, so that they're not being trapped and so forth, that they're very egregious forms of animal cruelty. We should be able to give all animals a certain degree of protection.
One quick question before the break. We can agree it's not okay to snare golden retrievers. How about a mousetrap?
Well, again, what we're dealing with in this course of legislation is most things. We don't get down into the hunting, Indian hunting or mousetraps and so forth. We're talking about stuff like bear hunting and trapping and things of that nature, besides companion animals. So we deal with the more pertinent issues, the more demanding issues that we have now.
We're going to come back in just a minute and talk more about this subject, in particular using animals in research and testing for medical purposes, raising cattle for slaughter, and other similar issues. Walter and I will be right back. And welcome back to It's the Law. Before we continue our discussion, Walter, let's just set the stage a little bit about what Maine law does say, particularly Maine criminal law, about abuse of animals.
Sure, it's really quite significant in terms of the number of penalties available. Many years ago, there was really just a single statute that only involved civil penalties, meaning you'd have to pay fines and things would happen to you in terms of money. But Maine law now has not only misdemeanor crimes for animal cruelty, but also felony level crimes. Class C crimes that carry with them imprisonment of up to 5 years in jail and $5,000 in fines, as well as restitution and things along those lines. These involve people who have many prior misdemeanor convictions or particularly egregious cases involving cruelty to animals that will, in essence, raise that up to a felony level offense. Some people have suggested that there are some laws that deal with animals that are more significant than if the same thing was done with humans. And in essence, you could do something to a dog that would make it more serious. You go to jail longer than as if you'd done that same thing to another person. These are all offenses. Really, in the last 10 years, have been a pretty major movement, including a bill in the last legislature, the last 6 months that did not go through, but dealt with animal hoarding cases and raising certain animal hoarding cases up to felony-level offenses.
The 80 cats as opposed to the 5 cats.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you know, there's an increasing body of research that seems to suggest that those who abuse animals are, you know, the next step, one step away from abusing people and domestic violence and murders. In fact, there's some research I've seen from PETA that organization promotes, which takes a look at the 6 mass murderers, starting back with Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, and goes all the way up to Jeffrey Dahmer, and talks about their personal history of animal abuse. Maybe it's sort of like a gateway drug sort of theory.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty significant. You're talking about 70 or even 80% of people involved in those kind of crimes.
Let's go back and talk about a specific issue that's come up recently here in our hometown, and that's the circus. The Shriners, for decades, have put on a wonderful circus at usually it used to be the Armory, and now at the Civic Center. And they come in for a couple of nights, and it's obviously geared toward the children. And this year, for the first time, there was really demonstrations and outcry against the circus for the way it treats its animals. And I think actually for having animals, wild animals in captivity to begin with. Those of us who grew up going to the circus like that, it's a different kind of mindset to even think of those issues. But should we have animal-free circuses? Beth?
Oh, I definitely think so. And we have actually been demonstrating against the Shriners for many years. In the past, they brought elephants, and now they're not bringing elephants. But, you know, these are wonderful endangered species that they cart around. Actually, they rent these elephants from corporations that rent them to the circus, so the Shriners aren't literally, it's not their elephants, but they cart them around the country in chains and little, trucks, and it's really not a good way to teach children about animals and how elephants actually live in the wild. It's really cruel, and Maine Friends of Animals and Maine Animal Coalition has protested against this for years, because you can have a perfectly good circus without an elephant.
Robert, is it the way they're treated, and we could treat them better, and you wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, or is the fact that they're put in captivity and they're used for show, and even if we treat them well, just shouldn't be doing it?
You shouldn't be doing it. These are wild animals. And first of all, the only way you can make an animal perform the way they do, you have to break the will of the animal. That means some very harsh treatments to make that animal succumb to being able to be done that. Then they're carted around, as Beth said, in trailers and so forth. They're chained for 23 out of 24 hours. That's why I see them rocking back and forth. These are animals that are half dead in soul and body, and totally dead in soul. And then finally they get disposed of in roadside places and so forth. It's a very intelligent, sentient, social animal that should never be in a circumstance like that.